Karen told me if I didn't move my boat off her beach, she'd call the Coast Guard. We live on a damn lake in Michigan. There is no Coast Guard. Think you know where this is going? I bet you don't have a clue. But hey, go ahead and drop your guess in the comments. Most people who end up in fights with their HOA moved into the wrong neighborhood. Me? I was here before the neighborhood even existed. My dad bought this land back in the 80s, just a weird triangle-shaped patch of wooded shoreline on the edge of this little lake. Back then, it wasn't worth much. The road was gravel, the water was brown half the year, and the nearest gas station was 15 minutes away, but my dad saw something in it. Or maybe he just wanted to be left the hell alone. He built the house himself. No contractors, no blueprints, just him, a few buddies from the VFW, and a lot of duct tape and beer. It's not perfect. The floors creak in places, the windows fog up when it gets cold, and the basement still floods when the ice melts. But it's real. It's ours. It's got history. I grew up in that house, learned how to fish on the shore out back, learned how to drive on the old gravel trails before they paved them. First kiss was on the end of that little dock my dad built. First beer, too, if I'm being honest. When my dad passed, there wasn't much of a question about what to do with the place. He left it to me clean. No liens, no debt, just a title and a handwritten note that said, "Don't let anyone mess with this place. It's yours now. Take care of it." I framed it and hung it in the garage. After I got married, we stayed. My wife Leslie was hesitant at first. She's a reader, loves libraries, coffee shops, soft blankets. The house was a bit too rough around the edges for her, but it grew on her. Or maybe she just got tired of fighting me about it. Either way, we made it a home. We raised our daughter here, Emma. She's 11 now, smart kid, all heart, but sharp as hell when she wants to be. She loves the lake, always has. We used to go out in the canoe when she was little, just paddling along the edge while she made up stories about lake monsters and underwater treasure. These days, she's into sketching. She'll sit out on the dock for hours, just drawing boats and birds and whatever else catches her eye. I work construction, independent contracting mostly. Kitchens, decks, docks, all that stuff. Nothing fancy, but it keeps the lights on. I build things for other people during the day, then come home and fix the things I built for myself years ago. That's the rhythm. That little stretch of beach down behind the house? That's everything to me. It's not big, maybe 40, 50 feet across, but it's ours, not the community's, not shared access, ours. I put in a couple of Adirondack chairs down there, some stones for a fire pit, and a homemade wooden sign that just says Harris Cove. Half the letters are faded now, but I like it that way. It feels lived in, like it belongs. That's where I keep the boat. It's nothing fancy, just a 14-foot fishing boat with an old Mercury motor that takes 3 pulls to start and 1 to stall out when you're halfway across the lake. But she floats, and that's all that matters. Most weekends in the summer, I'd take Emma out on it just after dinner. Sometimes we fish, sometimes we just drift and talk about stupid stuff like what she'd name a pet alligator if she had one. It's our thing. Now here's the part that matters. Our property line runs right up against this fancy little gated community that popped up about 15 years ago. They bulldozed a bunch of the old woods and threw up 24 houses with matching mailboxes and vinyl fences. It's one of those neighborhoods where everyone's lawn looks like it's been trimmed with nail scissors and there's always some guy in a golf cart patrolling. Like he's in a retirement-themed version of Cops. I've got no beef with them, or, well, I had no beef. We don't use the same road. We don't get their mailers. I don't attend their HOA meetings, and they don't get a say in what I do on my land. That's always been the deal. At least it was. I don't know when exactly Karen became president of their HOA. Hell, I didn't even know her name until a few months ago. I just knew her as the woman with the perfect hair and the oversized sunglasses who liked to walk her little white dog, Coconut, I think, past my yard like she was doing a crime scene sweep. She never waved, just gave me that tight little smile like I was a charity case or a stray animal. But even then, I didn't think much of it. I've lived next to plenty of people who didn't like me, and I've learned not to take it personal. You live long enough in one spot, you learn to let people be weird in their own yards. Thing is, Karen doesn't believe in just her yard, and that's where everything started to change. It started with a letter, not a neighborly note or a handwritten, "Hey, could you," kind of thing. I'm talking about an actual, typed up, folded in thirds, stuck in a plastic sleeve letter tucked under a rock on the edge of my fire pit like a parking ticket. HOA letterhead, gold embossed logo, and everything. Real fancy. I remember holding it in my hands, thinking, how the hell did this end up on my property? That alone was already crossing a line. I opened it anyway because curiosity beats pride sometimes, and this one smelled like trouble. The tone of it was weird right off the bat. It wasn't angry, it was polite, but that kind of fake polite that makes your skin crawl. The wording was all official sounding, full of phrases like community concern, shared environmental responsibility, and non-compliant structures. Took me a minute to even figure out what they were talking about, and then I hit the sentence that made me laugh out loud. We are requesting the removal of the unregistered watercraft currently situated along the shoreline abutting the Harris property. This vessel has been observed as obstructing the community's visual harmony and may pose a safety concern to visiting residents. Obstructing visual harmony, that's what they called my boat. I walked straight down to the shoreline, half expecting to see graffiti or dead raccoons or something. But no, it was just my same old fishing boat, sitting on a few wooden rollers. I'd pulled it up the week before to scrub the algae off the hull. It wasn't blocking anything, wasn't on anyone else's land. Just tucked up beside the dock like it had been 100 times before. And unregistered? It was registered. I renew it every 2 years like clockwork. Tag was laminated and zip-tied right to the transom, same as always. So I reread the letter, now not laughing. There was no signature, just the HOA board, like it came down from some lakefront Vatican. It ended with a note that they encourage cooperation to avoid further escalation. Escalation? For a boat? I brought the letter inside and handed it to Leslie while she was putting away groceries. She didn't even read past the first paragraph before rolling her eyes. Oh God, Karen. I looked at her. Karen? You know this woman? Leslie gave me this face like she was surprised I hadn't put it together yet. She runs the HOA now. She tried to get me to join their little neighborhood book club last fall. Made a huge deal about reading The Secret and setting lakefront intentions. Lakefront intentions? I told her I intended to finish folding laundry and never talk to her again. That got a chuckle out of me, but it didn't make the situation less weird. I didn't respond to the letter, because again, this isn't their land. I don't pay dues. I'm not in their HOA, and my boat was exactly where it's always been, on my side of the property line, where no one except maybe ducks or frogs could trip over it. But the next day, I caught her standing at the edge of my lot again. Not on the road. Not even on the walking path that runs through their development. I mean, right up on my grass, standing there in her tennis shoes and crisp little collared shirt, staring at the boat like it had personally insulted her. I was out front stacking firewood. I looked up, caught her eye, and gave a little nod. That's it. Just a neighborly, non-confrontational, "Hey there." She didn't nod back, didn't smile, just turned around and walked back toward her place like she was inspecting a biohazard zone. That evening, we found another letter. This one was stuck in our mailbox, in it, not outside. That's a federal box, technically illegal, but whatever. Same letterhead, different phrasing. Still no signature. This one said, per HOA guidelines, shoreline structures and watercraft must adhere to aesthetic and spatial regulations to preserve community value. And here's the kicker. It included a printout, like, full color, of a photo of my boat. Someone had taken it from the walking trail above my property, zoomed in, and printed it out. The quality was grainy, but it was enough to make your stomach twist, because now it wasn't just a letter, it was surveillance. That's when it stopped being annoying and started feeling personal. Emma found the photo on the kitchen counter that night while I was outside, messing with the grill. I came in and she was just staring at it, holding it like she wasn't sure if she was in trouble. "Why is someone taking pictures of our boat?" she asked me. And buddy, let me tell you, there's no easy way to explain HOA politics to an 11-year-old without sounding insane. I told her someone just didn't like where it was parked, and she just nodded like she was already smarter than that. She's sharp, that one. Leslie said we should just ignore it, and part of me agreed. I mean, it's a boat on my property. How much more straightforward can that be? But something about the photo bothered me. Not just that someone took it, but that they printed it, that they walked it up to my mailbox, that they wanted me to know they were watching. It wasn't a complaint. It was a warning. And in hindsight, maybe I should have taken it more seriously, but at the time I just laughed, shook my head, and thought, Jesus, these people really have nothing better to do, which turns out was the wrong thing to think, because Karen wasn't just bored, she was planning something a whole lot bigger than a couple letters and a photo, but that's not what I knew then. Back then, all I saw was a cranky HOA board with too much free time and a weird obsession with my boat. Boy, was I wrong. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I laughed off the second letter, moved on with my life, and everything went back to normal. But nah, that was just the opening act. Karen was just getting warmed up. Couple days after the second letter, I came home from a job and noticed a bright orange cone set out near the edge of my property. Just sitting there like a traffic marker. At first, I thought maybe the city had come by, maybe there was a busted pipe, or they were marking something. But then I saw another one, and another. They weren't in any pattern or near any utility box, just spaced out in a sloppy line, running from the edge of my gravel driveway down toward the shoreline. I followed the trail, confused as hell, until I got to the last one, right by my dock. There was a little laminated sign zip-tied to it that said, "Pending environmental review, do not disturb." That's when it hit me. This wasn't the city, this was them. Karen and her band of clipboard crusaders were now declaring parts of my own property under review, like they were the EPA, my property, with no warning, no notice, nothing. I dragged every single cone back to the end of their trailhead and stacked them up like a big middle finger right where their walking path dips closest to my yard. Next morning, they were gone. Just gone. And in their place, a printed out flyer had been taped to the neighborhood bulletin board near their entrance gate. I never go near it, but Leslie saw it when she was out for a run. She snapped a picture and showed me later, over coffee. The flyer said, "Recent community concerns have arisen regarding the unauthorized development of lakefront space adjacent to Lot 32. Residents are advised to avoid the area until further clarification can be obtained from legal review." Now, let me break that down for you. Lot 32, that's me, that's my land. Unauthorized development? You mean the goddamn dock my dad built when I was 10 and the lawn chairs I bought at Lowe's last summer? Legal review? They were trying to make it sound like I was in the middle of some shady backdoor deal, like I was sneaking in concrete trucks at night and building a resort behind their backs. And the part that pissed me off most? Residents are advised to avoid the area. Like my property was toxic, like I was dangerous, like we were the problem. Now I'd love to tell you I marched over there and gave Karen a piece of my mind, that I called the city or sent them a certified cease and desist or whatever. But I didn't. I did what I always do. I kept my head down and stayed calm, because for a long time, that's how I handled people like her. I figured as long as I stuck to what was mine and didn't poke the hornet's nest, it'd all blow over. But Karen doesn't blow over. She doubles down. Few days after that flyer went up, I found my private property sign, hand-carved by my daughter the year before, missing. Just gone. One day it was there, the next it wasn't. I looked all over, checked the ditch, the trees, even down by the water. Nothing. I replaced it the same day with a newer one, rougher, hand-painted, bright red letters. Made sure it was posted high and solid, bolted into one of the old cedar posts near the fire ring. This one wasn't going anywhere. That lasted maybe 48 hours. Next time I walked out there, the new sign was still there, sure, but next to it, someone had hammered in another stake. This one had a shiny pre-printed plaque that said, "Community Waterfront, access for HOA members only." It was like a turf war in the suburbs, one sign saying mine, the other saying nope, and it didn't stop there. That weekend, I was working on some railings for a client across town. Long day, hot as hell. I came home, pulled into the driveway, and spotted something odd near the trail that runs between my place and the edge of the HOA development. A couple kids, maybe 10, 11 years old, were standing just inside my tree line, tossing rocks into the water. Now, normally I wouldn't care. Kids are kids. I was that kid once, but then I heard one of them shout, "I told you, we can come here now. It's on the sign." That stopped me cold. I walked down, not angry, just curious. "Hey, fellas, where you from?" One of them pointed toward the houses up the hill. "Over there. You got permission to be on this land?" They looked at each other like I'd asked them to recite the Constitution. "We're allowed now. The beach is part of the neighborhood," my mom said. I'd let that hang for a second. Then I said, "Well, tell your mom she's welcome to come talk to me about it." They left. Quick. But they weren't the only ones. That whole week I kept seeing new faces walking near the shoreline. A couple with a stroller. A guy with a fishing pole. One afternoon, I found a full picnic blanket laid out with 2 fold-up chairs and an empty bottle of rosé just chilling in the sand like it was a damn Airbnb listing, and not a single one of them asked. Not a knock. Not a word. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about the boat anymore. This wasn't just about visual harmony or HOA bylaws or some sign dispute. Karen was actively rebranding my shoreline, turning it into a community space by pure force of will. Like if she just said it out loud enough times and printed enough signs and told enough neighbors, it would magically become true. And the worst part? Some of them believed her. Not all, but enough. Enough that it started to feel like I was being erased. Like my family didn't exist, or at least didn't matter. I didn't sleep much that week. I'd get up, walk the perimeter, check the signs, check the shoreline. I didn't want to say anything to Emma, but she noticed. I know she did. One night she came down with her sketchbook and sat next to me while I was staring out over the water, just quiet. She didn't ask what was going on. She just held my arm and leaned her head on my shoulder. And I remember thinking, I can deal with a crazy neighbor. I can deal with dumb letters. I can deal with cones and flyers and whispers, but I won't let my daughter grow up thinking this kind of bullshit is normal. That was the first time I felt it, that gut twist that tells you something isn't just a hassle anymore, it's a fight. And the other side already started swinging. First thing I did was try to talk to her. I know. After everything she pulled, that probably sounds stupid, but I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted my land back, my space, my life without people picnicking on my damn beach. So I walked over. It was a Sunday morning, blue sky, one of those rare calm days where the lake looks like a piece of glass. Karen was out front pulling weeds from her flower bed, wearing this ridiculous sun hat and rubber clogs that made her look like a rich woman playing poor for Instagram. I stood by the edge of her driveway and said her name like I was knocking on a door, soft but clear. She looked up, saw me, and gave that same tight smile like she'd been expecting this conversation. "Karen," I said, "we need to talk." She wiped her hands on her gardening apron and walked over like I was one of her tenants behind on rent. I kept it calm. Told her I wasn't looking for drama, just trying to understand what the hell was going on with the signs and the flyers and the cones and, the sudden flood of strangers on my land. She blinked at me like she was genuinely confused, tilted her head, kind of bird-like. "Well, Tom," she said, in that voice that's meant to sound kind but somehow makes your ears itch, "we've received numerous concerns from members of the HOA about access rights and safety along the shoreline." I said, "What access rights? It's my property." And then she smiled. Not like she was amused, more like a cat watching a mouse get tired. "Well, that's the thing. There's some ambiguity around the original parcel maps and the easement boundaries. We're just trying to sort that out. It's not personal." Not personal? I asked her if she had any actual documents. Deeds, maps, anything. She said, "Our legal team is reviewing everything." Legal team. Like she was running a law firm out of her hydrangea garden. I could feel my jaw clenching, so I thanked her for her time and walked back home without saying another word. That's when I realized I needed help. Real help. I started by going to the township office. I figured if someone in zoning or property records could just pull up a plat map and show that my lot was separate, this whole thing could be put to bed. Easy, right? Yeah. No. The guy behind the counter was nice enough, but the system was a mess. Half the files were digital, the other half scanned in from God knows when. Took him nearly an hour to find the original land record for my lot, and even then it was this smudged old microfilm scan with half the edges cut off. He told me my property wasn't zoned under any HOA, but when I asked if he could give me something official to prove it, he shrugged and said, "I mean, you could request a certified copy. That might take a few weeks. We're kinda backed up right now." I requested it anyway. In the meantime, I called a local attorney I'd worked with a couple years ago during a building permit dispute. Real solid guy. We weren't close, but I trusted him to at least point me in the right direction. He listened to the story, let out a long sigh, and said, HOA drama. Gotta love it." Suats. He agreed to take a look at the documents I had and told me to start keeping a paper trail of everything. Every letter, every sign, every weird incident. He said that when HOAs get aggressive like this, it's almost always about two things: control and money. But here's the problem. I didn't have a lot of documents because nothing they were doing was official. Just printed signs, vague letters, and community gossip. I didn't have a damn thing I could drag into a courtroom. Still, I tried everything I could think of. I sent a letter to the HOA board, certified mail, return receipt requested, laying out my position clearly. My land, my boat, not their jurisdiction. Told them I expected them to remove the signs and stop encouraging trespassers. No response. I called the sheriff's office, explained what was happening, and asked what my rights were if someone walked onto my land without permission. The deputy was nice, but all he could do was shrug. Civil matter, he said. Unless someone's actively threatening you or damaging property, it's not really something we get involved in. Civil matter. That phrase started to feel like a curse, like it meant you're screwed, but not in a way we care about. I tried talking to some of the neighbors, people who lived along the same shoreline but had been there before the HOA was formed. Some of them were sympathetic. One guy, Rob, even said he remembered when my dad built the dock and always thought it was a cool little spot. But none of them wanted to get involved. Nobody wants to cross the HOA if they're still part of it. That's how Karen keeps power, through quiet fear. Even Leslie was starting to fray. She never said it outright, but I could tell. She started spending more time at the library after work, coming home with that flat, worn look around the eyes. She'd try to keep it together around Emma, but the tension was everywhere, in how she set down her coffee cup, in how she stopped correcting me when I swore in front of the kid. Emma, bless her, tried to pretend like everything was fine, but kids feel that stuff. She stopped going down to the dock with her sketchbooks, started asking if we could go to the other side of the lake instead, said the view was better. It wasn't. She just didn't want to see the signs. The real breaking point, though, was when I filed a formal complaint with the township, an official nuisance report against the HOA for trespassing and unauthorized signage. I figured if the law wouldn't help me directly, maybe I could use the code enforcement office to slap them on the wrist, just enough to make them back off. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from the township, from the HOA. They were filing a formal counterclaim, said my dock was structurally unsound, that it posed a liability to community visitors, and that the boat, my same old clunky 3-pull Mercury boat, was in violation of community aesthetic standards. Community. They used that word like a club, like a smokescreen, like if they said it enough times, I'd start to believe my home belonged to them. Leslie found me that night sitting on the back steps with a beer in one hand and the letter in the other. I didn't even look up when she came out. I just said, "They're trying to take it, Les." And she sat down beside me and didn't say anything for a long time. Eventually she said, "They can't." But her voice cracked on the word can't, and that scared me more than anything, because I'd done everything right. I followed every law. I talked. I listened. I hired the lawyer, sent the letters, called the sheriff, filed the complaint, and none of it mattered. Nothing changed. The signs were still there. The people kept coming. Karen kept smiling, that tight little smile, when she walked past my fence, and every day it felt like the ground under my boots was slipping just a little more. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was tired. Tired of being reasonable. Tired of being polite. Tired of watching everything my father built become a goddamn HOA talking point. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. If I didn't find a way to stop this, they were going to win, and I wasn't built for surrender. I didn't go down to the lake for a few days after that last letter came. Didn't check the signs, didn't walk the perimeter, didn't even untie the tarp from the boat. I just stayed inside, worked on half-finished house projects I didn't care about, drank bad coffee, and tried not to let Emma see how much it was all getting to me. Leslie said I should talk to someone. Not a lawyer, a someone, a friend, a neighbor, a voice that wasn't mine. And for once, I listened. I called Rick. Now, Rick's not what you'd call a close buddy. He's an old-school guy, retired sheriff's deputy, keeps to himself, fishes before sunrise, owns more camo than a Bass Pro Shop. But we've had a few beers over the years, swapped tips on repairing dock posts, that kind of thing. Most importantly, he's been here longer than anyone besides me. He picked up on the second ring and said, "Been wondering when you were going to call." I didn't even have to explain. He already knew. We met on his back porch, just 2 folding chairs, a rusted grill, and a cooler between us. No small talk, no pleasantries. I told him everything, laid it out like I was giving a deposition, and when I was done, he sat there for a long moment chewing on the side of his lip like he was trying to decide how much truth I could handle. Then he said, "You ever hear about the Jennings property?" I told him no. That was a few years back. He said, "Before your time with Karen, but right after she got on the HOA board, Jennings had a parcel right up against the northeast corner. Nothing fancy, just a camper, a fishing shack, and a busted old dock. but it was grandfathered in, not part of the HOA. I nodded, listening. She didn't like it, said it made the neighborhood look unfinished. Started in with letters. Then came the fines. Even though he wasn't a member, he ignored them. They started leaning on the township. Eventually filed a complaint with code enforcement. Cited unsafe conditions and unauthorized occupancy. Got the county involved. What happened? Place got condemned. They bulldozed it. One morning it was there. By sunset it was gone. No hearing, no warning. Jennings showed up the next day and nearly had a stroke standing in front of the rubble. Jesus, they said it was an emergency action, claimed squatters had been reported, told him if he didn't like it, he could take it up in court. He never did. Moved in with his son in Illinois. Place has been community green space ever since. I just sat there, staring at the trees. Then Rick said something that changed everything. She tried to do the same to your dad. I turned to him. What? He nodded slowly. Back when your old man got sick, when he wasn't around much. Karen pushed the board to absorb the shoreline. Claimed the property was vacant and unmaintained. She even filed a request with the assessor's office to get the zoning updated. I told your dad, and he about lost his mind. Marched in there with the original deed, photos, receipts, the whole nine. Shut it down hard. She backed off. But not for long. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. You're saying this has been going on for years? She plays the long game, he said. She waits until people get tired, or old, or gone. Then she moves in. You're not her first target, but you might be the first one with enough fight in him to stop her. That alone would have been enough to shake me, to light a fire. But Rick wasn't done. I've got something you need to see, he said. He went back inside, came out with an old cardboard file box, dumped it on the cooler. Inside were maps, old neighborhood plans, meeting minutes, notes, paper with real ink on it. Not digital, not edited, originals. Then he handed me a folder. Inside was a copy of a document titled Petition for HOA Expansion, Parcel Annexation Recommendation. It had Karen's name on it, and right underneath it, the parcel number. My parcel number, my land, circled in red ink. But the date on the document, that's what did it. The date was before the HOA had ever legally formed. She'd submitted a retroactive annexation claim, backdated. It was subtle, most folks wouldn't even notice. But there it was. She tried to rewrite the history of the neighborhood. On paper, and if no one had been paying attention, if no one like Rick had kept the old versions, she might have pulled it off. I just sat there, staring at the page, my brain on fire. She faked this, I said. She buried it, Rick replied, and she's hoping no one remembers. I drove home with that folder in my passenger seat like it was radioactive. Leslie was in the kitchen when I walked in, and I dropped it right on the table like it was proof of life. What's this? She asked. I just said everything, because that's what it was. Fort deal. For the first time in months, the weight started to shift. Not a lot, not all at once, but enough that I could breathe again. She didn't just overstep. She lied. She manipulated legal documents. She tried to steal what wasn't hers. And now, I had the proof. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. I wasn't a lawyer. I wasn't a fighter. I built decks for a living, but I knew one thing. Karen Shelby had finally made a mistake, and I was going to make damn sure she paid for it. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious, but because my brain wouldn't shut up. It just kept spinning. Pieces that hadn't made sense for weeks were suddenly snapping into place. That old letter about shared shoreline use, the cones, the sudden burst of foot traffic, all of it had been building toward something, a takeover. Quiet, strategic, slow, and damn near successful. Until Rick dropped that folder in my lap. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun started coming up, going over every page again and again, trying to figure out how someone like Karen could get away with that kind of backdated, fabricated HOA expansion attempt, and how I was going to unravel it without burning my whole life down in the process. Leslie came downstairs in her robe and just looked at me like she'd found a raccoon going through our taxes. She poured herself a cup of coffee, sat across from me, and said the most beautiful 5 words I'd heard in months. So, what's the plan, babe? I didn't answer right away. I wasn't totally sure yet, but I knew this wasn't going to be solved by yelling over a fence or slapping one more letter on someone's windshield. I needed to stop thinking like a guy trying to keep the peace. I had to start thinking like someone who wanted to win. First step was Marcy. Leslie had gone to high school with her, and they'd stayed in touch over the years. Marcy was one of those friends you didn't see for months but could call at midnight and she'd still bail you out of jail or help you file a zoning complaint. She was a real estate attorney. Smart as hell, cut through nonsense like a buzzsaw through drywall. She also hated HOAs with a passion that made mine look casual. We met at her office a couple days later. Tiny little building next to a taxidermy shop and a vape store. She greeted me barefoot, holding a coffee mug that said, "Don't make me cite statute." I handed her the folder. She started flipping through it while I talked, explaining what Rick told me, what had been happening, everything Karen had done since the first letter. She didn't say much at first, just kept flipping pages, her brow tightening a little more with each one. Finally, she looked up and said, "Well, Tom, this is illegal." Like, frowned upon illegal or actually illegal? She smiled, like felony fraud if you play it right. I exhaled, hard. She told me what I already suspected. Karen had submitted an expansion petition to the assessor's office with forged backing documentation, then lobbied quietly behind the scenes to make it all feel legitimate. It wasn't just overreach, it was premeditated. She asked me if I had any more paper trail, emails, letters, anything signed. I said not much. Karen was careful. No emails, no signatures, just anonymous notices and signs. But that folder Rick gave me? That was gold. It had the original maps, unedited meeting minutes, and most important, the version Karen tried to bury. Marcy asked if I could get her more. Anything that showed how the HOA had acted on that false claim. If they used it in meetings, budgets, permit requests, anything. She said if we could find a paper trail showing they acted on it as if it were real, even after knowing it wasn't, that's where the hammer would fall. So that became the mission. Gather proof that Karen knew this was fake, and used it anyway. I reached back out to Rick, asked if he still had HOA mailers or newsletters from the years in question. He laughed, said his wife never throws anything away. Brought me a dusty box labeled HOA BS, full of papers dating back a decade. Score. I went through that box like it was a treasure chest. I found one newsletter, 5 years old, that mentioned pending integration of eastern shoreline lots, with mine listed by number. That wouldn't mean much on its own. Except the annexation request Karen submitted was dated after that newsletter had gone out. Boom, she was already acting like my land was part of the HOA before she'd even officially tried to make it happen. Then came the second piece, a copy of a board meeting agenda printed from someone's personal email. It had my parcel number listed under New Business Compliance Review. Someone, at some point, had submitted a complaint against my property under their HOA rules. Rules that don't apply to me. They were enforcing policy outside their boundary. That's not just shady. That's leverage. While Marcy started building the legal angle, I went to work on the social side. I started calling other folks on the edge of the HOA, people who weren't active members or who'd had their own quiet beefs with Karen over the years. One guy, Doug, lived 2 doors down from me on the opposite side. Used to have a hand-built chicken coop until the HOA made him tear it down for being unsightly. He didn't say much when I called, but a couple days later, a manila envelope showed up in my mailbox with a note. Figured this might help. No return address. Inside, 2 copies of official HOA warnings with his name on them, and one with mine. My name, I had never received it. It was dated months back and cited excessive shoreline clutter, and it had Karen's signature at the bottom. That right there? That was the 3rd rail. She sent an enforcement letter to a non-member. She crossed the legal line. Finally. I brought it straight to Marcy, who looked like someone handed her a winning lottery ticket. "We have her," she said, but I still wasn't rushing. I wanted more. I wanted everything. Because here's the thing, I wasn't just trying to get her to back off. Not anymore. That part of the story was over. Now I wanted to end it. It felt different this time. Not like I was scrambling to defend myself or playing catch-up to whatever Karen cooked up next. This time, I had something real, solid ground. Evidence, leverage, and I wasn't about to waste it. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about being right. It's not enough. Not when the other side controls the story. Karen still had the illusion of legitimacy, the HOA board in her pocket, and a small army of neighbors who'd rather smile and nod than think for themselves, so we had to move smart. Marcy laid it out clean. We weren't going to start with a lawsuit. Not yet. That was the end game. What we needed first was pressure, the kind of pressure that cracks facades and makes people show their real faces. She called it surgical chaos. I just called it fighting back. First move was the township. Marcy drafted a formal complaint, not a generic one, but a detailed, footnoted, multi-page report complete with maps, dates, old newsletters, and that glorious signed violation letter Karen had sent me. She submitted it to the township's legal department, the zoning office, and the assessor's office, the exact people Karen had been buttering up for years. We requested a full investigation into the HOA's zoning practices, annexation claims, and misuse of code enforcement authority. Then we sent copies to the local paper, not the big city one. No, we went small, the community paper, the one with pictures of pancake breakfasts on the front page and school band fundraisers in the back. They loved a good local corruption story, and when I gave the editor a quick rundown, his eyebrows hit the ceiling. Homeowner fights rogue HOA over fake shoreline takeover. I could see the headline writing itself in his head. I didn't go public with my name just yet, not until we saw how it landed. Meanwhile, I started laying groundwork with the people who'd been staying quiet. I called Doug, the guy who sent me the envelope. Asked if he'd be willing to talk to Marcy. He said no at first, then he called back the next day and said, "Screw it, I'm in." I got coffee with two other neighbors who'd been on the edge of the HOA map, people who'd had their own run-ins with Karen over the years. One woman, Linda, told me she'd stopped attending meetings after Karen openly called her vegetable garden aesthetic pollution. The hell is that? Marcy coached them on what to say, how to frame their experiences, and what to do if things got legal. She was building a case not just against the HOA, but against the culture of intimidation Karen had weaponized. She said it had to be bigger than just me, because if it was just about me, they'd call me a crank and move on. But if we showed a pattern, that's when the cracks would show. And right on cue, Karen struck back. I came home from work one evening to find a shiny new sign posted right at the edge of my shoreline. This one had a seal on it, under review by the Lakeshore Community Safety Council. Never heard of that before. I Googled it. It didn't exist. She invented a council, just made one up, slapped it on a sign, and hoped no one questioned it. That right there told me something. She was panicking. She was throwing things at the wall, trying to reestablish control, but doing it sloppy. I didn't touch the sign. I left it, took photos, sent them to Marcy, and let it sit there like a big red flag waving for everyone to see. Then came the real blow. Karen filed a formal code enforcement complaint against me, said my dock was unstable, my boat was abandoned, and that I'd created a hazardous shoreline environment that could lead to child injury or drowning. She used the word drowning 6 times in 2 paragraphs. I found out about it not through a letter, but from a guy named Joel, city inspector. Showed up at my place in a beat-up Ford and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Sorry, man," he said. "Gotta check out the complaint." I don't think there's anything here, but you know. I walked him down to the dock, showed him the reinforced beams, the maintenance logs, even the updated registration for the boat. He nodded the whole time. "Looks fine to me." I asked if he wanted a copy of the HOA letter for his report. He looked surprised. "They put this in writing?" I handed it over. He left 15 minutes later and never came back. But a week after that, the paper ran the story. Not buried in the back. Page 1. Above the fold. Headline in bold letters, HOA accused of fabricating shoreline expansion, resident claims fraud, harassment. There was a photo of the sign, of the dock, of Karen's HOA flyer from months back with my parcel number circled like a prize hog at the fair. Karen went ballistic. I didn't see it myself, but Rick told me she called an emergency meeting of the HOA board that night. Said she came in with a binder full of documents and a wild look in her eyes. Tried to paint me as a coordinated saboteur spreading lies through local media. Problem was, people were already talking. The flyer. The fake council sign. The zoning complaint. Word was spreading. She wasn't controlling the story anymore. I didn't gloat. I didn't poke the bear. I didn't need to, because Karen had made her fatal mistake weeks ago when she forged that annexation document. And now, with everything surfacing, she was in defense mode. cornered, sloppy, lashing out in ways that only made her look worse. Marcy said it perfectly one night while we were going over the next steps. "You didn't just flip the board, Tom. You flipped the whole damn table." But I wasn't done yet, because as satisfying as it was watching her squirm, this wasn't about ego. It was about closure, about principle, about a promise I made to my dad when he handed me that deed. Don't let anyone mess with this place, and I wasn't about to stop until I finished the job. They always hold the HOA meetings in the clubhouse. Big white building with a fake copper roof and a keypad at the door like it's Fort Knox. I'd never been inside, never had a reason to. But this time I walked in the front door like I owned the place. Technically, I wasn't even supposed to be there. Not a member. No key fob. But word had spread. About the article, about the investigation, about Karen, and when Rick told me there was going to be a full house and people were talking, I knew I had to show up. Doug met me in the parking lot. The guy who sent me the anonymous envelope with the violation letter weeks ago. This time, he wasn't hiding. He had a folder under his arm and a look on his face like someone who just remembered he had a spine. "You ready?" he asked. I said, "Born ready." Inside, it was standing room only. I saw neighbors I hadn't talked to in years, people I'd passed on walks. Folks who used to wave and had gone quiet during all this HOA mess. They were here now, whispering to each other, looking around, waiting. And then Karen walked in. She looked different, not shaken exactly, but not in control either. She smiled, but it didn't land. Her posture was straight, but her eyes were scanning too fast, like she was trying to count how many people in the room were still on her side. She stepped up to the front, gavelled the meeting open, and started with the usual script. Financials.landscaping updates. Thank you to everyone for maintaining their properties with excellence. All that surface level garbage, but the tension was thick. People weren't here to talk about lawn clippings. Then, like she was trying to get ahead of it, she cleared her throat and said, "Before we move into new business, I want to briefly address the recent article and clarify some misinformation that's been circulating." That's when Doug raised his hand. Karen blinked. You could tell she hadn't planned for interruptions. She called on him, trying to keep her tone sweet. He didn't stand. He didn't posture. He just opened his folder, pulled out a printout of the annexation document, the one with the backdated request and my parcel circled, and said loud and clear, "Can you explain this?" Dead silence. Karen's smile didn't just drop, it cracked. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That's a preliminary draft. It wasn't ever filed." And I said, "It was filed. We confirmed it with the assessor's office. It's on record." Heads turned. Then Rick stood up. He had a whole damn binder with him. Old newsletters, HOA board minutes, maps, copies of my parcel number being referenced in planning meetings before any vote had taken place. He spoke calmly, methodically, and the more he talked, the redder Karen's face got. Then Marcy stepped forward. She wasn't even a resident, but when she introduced herself as my attorney and laid out a timeline, dates, signatures, property records, forged documentation, violation of zoning laws, Karen stopped taking notes, stopped blinking. Just stared straight ahead like she could somehow freeze time and hit rewind. It was like the air got sucked out of the room. I don't even remember who said it next, but someone called for a vote, a formal on-the-record vote to remove Karen from her position pending a full investigation. I think it was Linda, the one with the garden Karen tried to shut down. She just stood up, voice shaking, and said, "Enough is enough." And the whole room followed. They voted. Not one hand went up to defend her. Not one. Karen sat there, stunned. Like the floor had dropped out, and she was still waiting to hit the bottom. She didn't argue, didn't scream, didn't threaten legal action or try to twist it around. She just picked up her papers and walked out. Nobody clapped, and nobody said a word. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quieter than that. It was final. After the meeting, people came up to me, people I hadn't seen in forever, offering handshakes, apologies, even some damn good homemade cookies from a woman I swear I thought hated my guts. Someone left a six-pack of local beer on my porch that night with a sticky note for the guy who held the line. Later that week, the township sent me confirmation that my shoreline was now officially recognized as outside of HOA jurisdiction, not ambiguous, not under review. Black and white, it was mine again. The fake signs disappeared. The cones never came back. The neighborhood newsletter printed a one-sentence update buried at the bottom of the last page. Karen Shelby has stepped down from the HOA board, effective immediately. Just like that, the empire she tried to build out of fake bylaws and ego collapsed. And you know what? The lake was quiet again. Not silent, just peaceful, like it had exhaled. And so did I. The new dock's better than the old one ever was. Took me a few weeks, but I rebuilt it by hand. Treated lumber, stainless steel fasteners, wide enough for 2 chairs side by side. Not bad for a guy who spent most of the summer knee-deep in paperwork and HOA drama. There's still a little stain on the end of the dock where Emma knocked over a jar of sweet tea and tried to scrub it off with her sleeve. I told her to leave it. Gives it character. She's back to sketching out there now. Same old sketchbook, new pages. She sits with her legs swinging over the edge, hair pulled back, drawing the water like she's trying to make it stand still. Every once in a while, she'll hold one up for me to see and ask, "Does this look like the lake?" I always say yes, even when it doesn't, because it feels like it. Leslie's different now, too. Lighter. She smiles more, laughs easier. Sometimes I catch her just standing on the porch, looking out toward the shoreline with her coffee, like she's finally seeing it again, not as a battlefield, but as home. And me? I'm still here. Same guy, more or less. Still fixing things for other people by day, fixing things around here by night. But there's something else now, a stillness I didn't realize I'd lost. The kind that comes after a long fight, not the kind where you're bloody and bruised, but the kind where you walk away whole, changed, but not broken. Rick comes by now and then, brings bait, drinks half my beer, talks too much about the fishing hole up past the bend. I let him. Guy earned it. He always leaves with a smile and says the same thing before he heads back to his place. Told you she'd fold. Marcy's still chasing paperwork, but she sent me a thank you card last week with a sketch of a gavel on the front and a note inside. Some people fight back. You didn't just fight. You built something better. I'm not sure about all that. I didn't start this to make a point. I started it because someone tried to erase something that mattered to me, something real, and I wasn't about to let that happen. Not for fake rules, not for power plays, not for a woman with a clipboard and a god complex. Thing is, land doesn't fight for you. It just sits there, waiting. Waiting for someone to care enough to defend it? I did. And now, when I sit out by the fire pit with a cold drink and the sound of frogs chirping in the dark, I feel like my dad's still around. Like the promise I made him, quietly to myself, the day I found that old note in the garage, finally got honored. Don't let anyone mess with this place. It's yours now. Take care of it. Yeah, I did, and I always will.